Uh, I'm going to talk very briefly about etching, and I'm going to be talking about the way I feel that artists work with their hands. Uh, we're talking about the handmade object here, but one of the things I want to talk about is the thinking and planning that goes into these objects. Now, I'm perfectly aware of how I use my mind to draw on different sources of information uh, in the process of making an etching, but I'm profoundly aware of the way my hands think and discover my most significant forms. Uh, as you're looking at these clips here today, I want you to follow the hand and think about what the hand is doing. Uh, in order for an etching to be produced, the hand has to execute a finely tooled copper surface. It's one of the first things you'll see. And the way that copper surface is drawn under the pressure, drawn to a sheet of paper under the immense pressure of a press, is something that imparts an etching's characteristic appearance, that is, its surface. It's an embossed surface, but it's a surface that intimately traps and allows the artist to manipulate inks and then cooperates by giving them up to a sheet of paper and sculpting the surface of that paper at the same time it transfers the ink. This is something that you can feel when you hold an etching in your hands. Now, it's important to remember that the way most of us see an etching is in reproduction. Even in this film clip, the etching is being reproduced. Therefore, since you're not going to be holding an etching in your hand, one of the things I want you to do is to think about the way the hand moves the project along. The hands are our servants. They are also great revealers of form. Already I would run the risk of repeating myself as I speak here. The handmade process, it's different than the mechanical process. In the handmade process, we're all artist and viewer alike, very fine instruments of human measurement. The handmade object calls forth those instruments much differently than a machine-made object does, if at all. Okay, hope you enjoy what follows. Okay, here is the same plate further along in the aquatinting process. If you are making an etching, you are concerned with the world of dark. As etchings get more detailed, they get darker. If you're going to have a detail be light, it has to be orchestrated and thought out in terms of stopping out. The tendency of etching is to get darker and darker the more you work on it, so that when you go back in to adjust all the shadows and find the nuances, you have to save the lights, and then you have to save the shadows except for what you want to deepen. This pattern now with the stop out, which is a thinned brown liquid that's painted on repetitiously. If you're going to go back into the acid and keep adjusting the colors, assumes a pattern sort of like you see it now. In particular, where it's easy to recognize, here beside the head, I'm going to save all the darks in the head except for one shadow that sort of relates to the eye. Stop it all out, preserving that edge against the shadow, which will deepen, especially around the hand that's holding the cigarette. All of that shape, which I'll point to if it's not too distracting. Back here is going to get darker. This is going to get darker. that light edge will be saved. I'm working in this area. Over here in the shadows of the chicken coop, you see the brown is going to keep the tone that's there. Anything that's open, like that, and over here behind the broom is going to get darker. There will be stages in the shadow. They will give you the depth in the dark. It's 2 minutes. That's probably too long, but I'm going to show you the ground over here on the table. A little cup of the ground here, and a little device that I use for thinning it and getting it the proper brushing consistency. Usually use a better brush than you would think of for applying the ground because, this is, part of the detail. Etcher's needle over here, fashioned out of a converted dental tool. Camera has a limited ability to focus. It's really not very complicated. Probably, I don't usually work so close to my inks, but there you have it. There's a pile of ink that's sort of left over from additioning. It's going to be used for proofing the next image. Here's the proof after the deepening of the aqua tint. You see some very solid shapes now. I threw in some dry point lines here to help build the tones on the side of the figure. They show up nicely against the denser aqua tint over there, sort of catching more reflected light out here, where the broom is. It has to be worked out a little bit, but there's a little pulse of light there. It's good. Clouds are staying very, very light. I haven't been back to them in a long while. Some dry point lines in here. Now that tone deepens, dry point lines look nice over there. Okay, here is the tracing transferred by sort of a homemade transfer paper pastel, rubbed out onto a sheet of paper. Drawing is on tracing paper, is reversed, transferred to the plate. Prefer not to use white. Using a value of pink is just a little bit easier. Not much more need to be said here. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 proofs here in quick succession. As stage bites of line, times in the acid between 10 minutes and 30 minutes, 35 minutes, superimposed on each other, so you'll see the image sort of filling out or filling in. It's one of the first proofs. Second proof, a little bit more, contrast, a little bit more development. Still line only. Next proof, beginning of aqua tint. And aqua tint either 30 seconds to 60 seconds, really 2 bites. 30 second most clearly, you can see up here. 30 second top of the leg. 1 minute in through here. No aqua tint in this big area of cross hatching yet. Okay.